welcome to this edition, this interview, that I want to share with you some of the good work that some of my colleagues have been doing with interaction styles. And so welcome, Carol. This is Carol Linden, who is sitting out in the area where it's been cold and frozen for a really few days. So how about if you just start and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, and you can even talk about that ice out there if you want.
I'm Carol Linden. My company is Effective with People, and I have been a psychological type practitioner, OD consultant for about 15 years now. I am a keynote speaker, I'm an author, and I love to both give public classes and to go into companies and work with teams and work with managers, always around the natural differences in people and working styles, interaction styles, and temperament, and how they can, through knowledge of those filters, they can quit misinterpreting and misunderstanding each other, and they can start working better together. That's the core of everything I do, whether it's speaking or teaching, writing, is always around how we've all got different filters and how we can get past that.
Great. How long have you been using interaction styles?
Since 2007, when I learned it. I immediately came back to North Carolina and used it. It's impossible not to use once you look to the filter. First, I used it in my own life to help myself do better in a certification program. I was using the wrong interaction style, trying to pass the certification, and once I switched to chart the course style, it was a breeze and I passed. So I learned firsthand this stuff is real. I also teach it. I use it with individual coaching clients. I also use it with roomfuls of people. And the reason I did, I always start with it now, Linda. I don't start with any other models. I use other models, but I always start with interaction styles. I teach a whole day class in it. I can do a half day if I have to, but I love a whole day. Mm-hmm. And the reason is working adults get this. They get it immediately. It's immediately obvious that I'm not making something up, that I'm not doing something archaic, that these are real things that they've observed and experienced. And the stories just start flowing out of them that validates interaction styles. I love using it, and I always start with it because it's about behavior, and that seems to be very safe for people to talk about that. I use it constantly with clients, whether it's in a room full or one-on-one. I can't imagine to go back to not using interaction styles, frankly.
Well, what just occurred to me is that somebody may pop into this video on my YouTube channel and not have a clue about what interaction styles is. So maybe we ought to tell them just real briefly.
I think you should do that. And then I can chime in with a story.
Okay. Well, so the interaction styles is a lens, a way of looking at individual differences that there's a long history, and I won't tell people much about that one, but it started off in 1985, when I was at a session conducted by Dr. David Kersey, who was my mentor. And he talked about those people who were role directing and people who were role informing. And it was a very simple distinction that you could make. And it had to do with a preference for one over the other. And then the next conference, 2 years later, David talked about, well, there's another dimension we should look at, and that is, do people tend to be initiating when they meet somebody? Are they more comfortable making that first move, or are they more comfortable waiting and seeing what it's going to be like before they jump into the conversation? And then we were in the land of personality types, so the Jungian types and the 16 types. And so what that led us to was, okay, we had temperament, which is what I had from David Kersey. We had the 4 temperaments, and then you could go directing and informing and then initiating and responding. And if you did that, you got to 16 types, which really was kind of like those surveyors out there, figuring out where to build a road or put a building or where things are, and they take a data point from this side and a data point from that angle, and they get a much more accurate data point. And so that led us into using multiple models to figure out where people landed. And what emerged with then was, it seemed to be that I put tape on the floor and people were in the quadrants based on the intersection of these two dynamics. Are you more comfortable telling people what to do? Are you more comfortable just giving information? Are you more comfortable initiating an interaction with people you don't know? Or would you rather wait? So we put people in these quadrants, and I would have had some information about them. So I would make up stories kind of about what they were. And what emerged out of that was, oh my gosh, we think this is a model that stands on its own, which means that there is a holistic pattern. And we name them, it's hard to find a name for something. So there is the in charge interaction style with a drive for accomplishment. There's a chart the course interaction style, which is about having some course of action, not always a plan, but some course of action and some points along the way to see if they're making progress. And then there's another one called Get Things Going, which is about getting people involved. And then there's the behind the scenes, which is a little more laid back and waiting to see and integrating whatever's emerging there. So probably already just with those names, you could pretty much guess that Carol and I have different interaction styles, pretty much, although I'm in presenter mode here. So I'm moving out of my comfort zone of behind the scenes into a more animated style. So but anyway, so what we started to say, okay, here's what those patterns are. And it's turned out to be a pretty useful thing that has helped a lot of practitioners like you, Carol, do things that were a little more complicated to do if you were using the 16 types. That's too much for people to hold, but you still could stay holistic with it. So anyway, what kind of results are you? Well, first of all, would you add anything to that?
No, I knew you would do that very well, so I asked you to do it.
You might guess that Carol has the initiating preference and I have a responding preference. So would you tell us a little bit about what kind of results you've seen from all of that work? Maybe a variety of stories besides your own story in that training.
Oh, sure. It's incredibly rewarding to use it. Adults get it right away. They love it. It animates them. I immediately move into an exercise with them. What about this looks like you? What about it looks like people you've worked with? And then, of course, let's start with the positive, appreciating. It's called appreciative inquiry. Let's start with what's working and say I ask people in groups to say, what about this style? What positive contributions does this style make in the workplace? And it never fails, Linda. They always, and I have them in mixed groups throughout the room, it never fails, can come up with the positive things each of these styles contributes in the workplace. I had one very, a funny story. An in charge fellow, first day's interaction style, second day's temperament, and I always start out, does anybody have any ahas overnight or insights you'd like to share? Never assume adult learners arrive the next day at the same point they left your room the day before. I've been taught that. And this in-charge guy stuck up his hand and said, yes. He said, my wife had my in-laws over to dinner last night, so I started teaching them interaction styles over dinner. And I'm thinking, this is one of those do not try this at home kind of things to do. So he said, I taught interaction styles. They just loved it. And it turned out we had all four styles present at the table and the four of us. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure he's an in-charge theorist. And I'm not sure much of anybody would have the confidence to go straight home and teach his in-laws what he learned that day. But he did, and they loved it. Mm-hmm. So that's my funny story. And I also have a really moving story. I was teaching the difference between, I start off with chart the course. And then which is the wants information ahead of time, wants things laid out, explain, wants to chart the course, see where you are. And then the in-charge personality who moves faster, decides fast, doesn't really go into details with other people a lot. And I was explaining the difference, and I worked with job seekers at this community college program. And a man who was about 60 raised his hand and said, oh, now I realize why I no longer have a job. You could have heard a pin drop in the room. And it boiled down to He was an in-charge personality. He had had a boss that understood that about him. This guy did high-level planning, construction work for medical facilities, and he'd been doing that for 17 years. He suddenly got a chart the course boss who asked a lot more questions, and he said, I now see that I must have looked like a gunslinger to that guy. I could never understand why he kept asking me questions. I was annoyed with him. I didn't give him all the information he wanted because it seemed so useless. And I'm just awed when I teach this, the immediate application adults are able to make at this. And insights like that, he got it. When he deals with chart the course in the future, he needs to be more respectful of that person's needs. So I have had nothing but really powerful, moving, rewarding experiences using this with clients.
Wow. And, I share the concern you would have about, oh my gosh, this person's gone off and is teaching it, and how in one day did they really get enough? And I was thinking about what it was you did that was particularly valuable, and that is by focusing on the strengths. Yeah. So that the person winds up, whoever is in the workshop, if they've really related to it, then that may be what they have to convey. And so, and then the touching kinds of realizations that increase somebody's self-awareness, so that then they can say, oh, I now know what I need to do. Yeah. Because, you're the only person really that can change. Right. You could want other people to change, and you can tell them what you want. You can tell them what to do to change, and sometimes they'll do it and sometimes not. But when that need to change isn't, it doesn't, my experience was when people are in a situation it's not working for them for whatever reason, and there's a need to change, it's hard to find what to change to if you don't have to if you have to completely give up who you are, and that's how it feels like. So if somebody said to me, oh, hey, Linda, I really think you better be more animated in your presentations, which was feedback I got many years ago, or they said to me, I don't know why you can't just go to all these networking meetings and connect easily. It's a lot easier for me to shift out of my natural comfort zone into something, as long as I know I can go back there, and as long as somebody's modeled something for me to do differently. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good note there. That's one of the additional positive thing about it. You're teaching them what the other preferences look like. And there are times when we all need to get out of our preference. Like as a project manager at a software company, I managed documentation projects for years. I was unconsciously, naturally going into chart the course mode to do that. I don't think all project managers are chart the course people. A lot of them probably are, but I really believe you have to do some chart the course behaviors or you can't manage a project. And it really helps to get people conscious about it, because there are probably sometimes we're naturally flexing, but there are other times where we're blowing it and we don't know why. And having a conscious model and being able to make a conscious decision, I think that's part of the power of interaction styles.
It could be. And you could do that with other models. I think it's the beauty of it is that it's simple enough, but it's not overly simplistic. So that's the danger I see with it, is that it can be easily, oh, well, you're a chart the course style, you're an in-charge person, or you always want to take charge. By the way, if somebody takes charge, that means they're frustrated that things aren't getting done, and that may or may not be their style.
That's right.
To the point of taking charge, it isn't pretty. So anyway, what's been most helpful to me is working with somebody who has just an incredibly graceful in-charge style, and co-training with two people who are on the faculty, co-training with them. So I had lots of role modeling about what that looks like graciously, because if I had to shift into it without knowing what it's like, done graciously, it would have been a lot harder, a lot more not so gracious. And I'm actually better at it in the classroom than I am at home. So, yeah. So is there anything that you would think would be if somebody's interested in this lens, besides, if you're an individual and you want to know more about it, there are some books and some resources that I'll put on the end of the video clip. But if you really want to use this in your work as a facilitator or as a coach, what has been most helpful for you with that?
Oh, hands down, two things. One, I always buy, and I know you'll have the whole name of it at the end for these folks, the red book, the thin red book, that interaction styles, the intro one. All my students get that. I won't hold that one. Understanding yourself.
Although it's one of those funny things because it's, it's reversed. But anyway, you get the picture. So go ahead.
I always use that in the class. And if I'm in a company where they're buying it, I suggest they buy it. For my community college clients, I actually bring the books in and let them borrow them, and they give them back, although some of them want to buy them at the end, and I tell them how. But that book, Linda, really helps them get to the heart of it and see it easily. Mm-hmm. I think the exercises, it's really important to teach a tiny bit of theory and then boom, help adults apply it, and then have a conversation in small groups. Mm-hmm. And then have the big room conversation. There's in the second book, the book you wrote for practitioners, that's thicker. I'm sorry, I can't think of names of books off the top of my head, but that book is half highlighted in yellow. It's a book you put out just a couple of years ago.
Oh, it's Interaction Essentials, and it's actually for lay people, but it has more detail and more application in it.
Absolutely. Well, mine is like half highlighted in yellow now. It's just more information and helps me be even better about helping people with it. Mm-hmm. People take to it so naturally. I just love using it. I always started with another model first, and now I always start with interaction styles and then move to other models, because people are not threatened by this model. It doesn't seem overly personal. It doesn't seem invasive. They get it that it's about behavior, and the first day, people do this kind of trust bonding thing, and then the next day we will go, if it's a 2-day class, into temperament. And that's a little deeper, a little closer to the chest, but I find they've built the trust and bonded over interaction styles, and they move into temperament more easily. So I'm thrilled with having it as a tool I start with.
Great. Well, I've been so thrilled in having you in the workshops that I've then trained the trainer work in. How many times? 2 or 3 times, I think.
Oh, I've lost track, and I've loved them all.
So you've been very helpful with that, and I'm really proud to have you now as a colleague out there in the world doing the work. So thank you so very, very much for your time.
Absolutely. Glad to do it, dear.
And your smiling face, even if it's all icy outside.
That's right. Hey, the ice melted. I can now leave after 4 days. I'm a happy person.
All right, then. So what I'll do is I will put Carol's information up at the back in case somebody is in, where are you located?
I'm in Durham, North Carolina, but I travel.
Okay. So in case somebody wants to get in touch with you.
Absolutely.
And of course, I'll put some information up there if you want to get in touch with me. And, maybe you want to take an online training or something, who knows. So anyway, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you soon sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks for the call, dear.
Thank you.